I'm Dylan Cross, son of Eden's mayor, and I guard a toll booth that costs 1 penny to pass through. But that's not what it really collects. It collects voices, reflections, souls. Things that used to be human drive up to my window every night, testing me, tempting me, trying to make me break the rules my father gave me. I've been offered money that screams. I've heard my name scratched into the floor by things that live beneath it. I've watched my own voice crawl out of the walls and try to convince me to open the door. And every morning when the sun rises, I walk back to town wondering if I'll make it through the next night. Because the toll booth isn't just a job, it's a test. And failure means joining them. Rule 4. Never let the booth stay silent for more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes of silence. That's all it takes. Dad warned me that silence in the booth isn't empty. It's full. Full of things that are listening, waiting for permission to fill the void. I learned that the hard way when I dropped my phone and spent 7 minutes looking for it in complete quiet. When I finally spoke, something else spoke first. It was my 4th night working the toll booth outside Eden. By then I thought I had the hang of things. Pay attention to the rules, stay alert, and keep the radio on. Simple enough, right? But that night, around 1:30 a.m., I made a stupid mistake. I was texting my buddy Marcus about the weird stuff I'd been seeing at the booth. The blue car with the perfect teeth driver, the headless officer, all of it. My fingers were flying across the screen when the phone just slipped right out of my hands. It fell between the desk and the wall, wedging itself in that narrow gap where I couldn't quite reach it. Damn it, I muttered, dropping to my knees. The radio had been playing classic rock, but right then the song ended. The DJ started talking, but his voice faded into static, then nothing, just dead air. I was too focused on retrieving my phone to notice. I stretched my arm into the gap, fingers brushing against the phone case. Almost had it. I shifted position, reaching deeper. The booth was cramped, and I had to practically shove my shoulder against the wall to get the right angle. The silence pressed in around me, but I didn't notice that either. My fingertips finally caught the edge of the phone. I pulled it out, victorious, and sat back on my heels with a relieved sigh. Finally, stupid thing. That's when I realized how quiet it was. No radio, no wind, no distant car engines, nothing. I glanced at my watch, 1:37 a.m. My stomach dropped. I'd been on the floor for 7 minutes. 7 minutes of complete silence. Okay, I said aloud, my voice cracking slightly. No big deal. I'm talking now. It's fine. But it wasn't fine, because the moment I spoke, something else did too. No big deal, a voice echoed from somewhere in the booth. It sounded exactly like me. Same tone, same inflection. I'm talking now. It's fine. I spun around, heart hammering. The booth was empty, just me. Hello, I called out. Silence. Then from the corner near the ceiling, hello? My own voice, repeating my words with perfect timing, like an echo. Except echoes don't come seconds later, and they don't come from corners. I stood up slowly, eyes scanning every inch of the booth. The mirror, the desk, the door. Nothing looked different, but something felt wrong. The air was heavier somehow, denser. I'm just tired, I said, trying to convince myself. Just tired, the voice agreed from behind me. I whipped around, still nothing there. My hands were shaking as I reached for the radio. I twisted the dial, desperate for any sound. Static crackled through the speaker, then caught on a station. Some talk show I'd never heard before. The host was mid-sentence. And that's why you should never let the silence settle in. It gives them a doorway, you see, a space to occupy. I cranked up the volume, letting the sound fill the booth. The oppressive feeling lessened slightly, but I could still sense something else in there with me, listening. For the next 20 minutes, I didn't shut up. I talked about anything and everything. The weather, my classes, that weird pizza place in town that puts honey on their crust. Anything to fill the air with sound. The radio host kept talking too, his voice a comforting drone in the background. Then, at 1:58 a.m., a car approached. It was an old sedan, brown and beat up. The driver rolled down his window and handed me a penny without a word. I raised the toll arm, and he drove through. Normal. Finally, something normal. I settled back into the chair, the radio still playing, but now I was hyper-aware of every sound. The hum of the heater, the crackle of the radio, my own breathing. At 2:15 a.m., the radio cut out again. My heart jumped into my throat. I immediately started humming. Just the first song that came to mind, Happy Birthday. Ridiculous, but it worked. I kept humming, watching the seconds tick by on my watch. 1 minute, 2 minutes. At 2:17, the radio sparked back to life. A woman's voice singing a lullaby I didn't recognize. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, but the relief was short-lived, because at 2:20 a.m., I heard knocking. 3 soft raps against the booth wall. From the inside, I froze, my humming dying in my throat. The knocking came again. 3 measured knocks, like someone asking politely to be let in. "Who's there?" I managed to say. The knocking stopped. Then, in a voice that sounded exactly like mine, "Who's there?" It was coming from inside the wall. I pressed myself against the opposite side of the booth, as far from the wall as I could get. The knocking started again, moving now. It traveled along the wall from left to right, circling around behind me. I spun to follow it, my back never facing the sound. "I'm talking," I said loudly. "I'm making noise. You can't, whatever you are, you can't." "Can't," my voice repeated from inside the wall, but this time it sounded amused. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't polite anymore. Bang, bang, bang. The whole booth shook with each impact. I grabbed the radio and turned it up as loud as it would go. The lullaby blasted through the speaker, distorting slightly from the volume. The knocking continued, now coming from multiple directions. The walls, the floor, even the ceiling. It was like the booth was surrounded. Then I remembered Dad's rules. I fumbled for the crumpled paper in my pocket and scanned the list frantically. Rule number 4, never let the booth stay silent for more than 5 minutes. That was it. No instructions on what to do if I'd already broken it. Think, Dylan, think. My eyes landed on the old radio. Dad had said never to turn it off. The radio was the key, but it was already on. Unless... I twisted the dial, searching through the static, past the lullaby station, past the talk shows and classic rock. I kept turning until I found it. Radio Harmony. The station crackled to life, and a smooth voice filled the booth. "Good evening, night wanderers. You've found Radio Harmony, your beacon in the dark. For those of you who've let the silence grow too long, we have just the remedy. Stay with us." The knocking stopped. The pressure in the air lifted slightly. A slow, rhythmic drum beat began to play. It wasn't music exactly, more like a heartbeat, a pulse. I found myself breathing in time with it, in and out, steady. The voice returned. "Silence is a living thing in places like yours. It feeds on stillness, grows in the gaps between sounds. But sound is a weapon too. Your voice is a weapon. Use it." I swallowed hard. Okay, I can do that. "I can do that," I repeated louder, forcing strength into my voice. The drum beat on the radio grew louder, faster. I started talking again, this time with purpose. "I'm Dylan Cross. I'm 19 years old. I work at this toll booth because my family has protected Eden for generations. This is my booth, my shift. And you, whatever you are, you're not welcome here." The walls shuddered. "You're not welcome here," I said again, louder. The drum beat reached a crescendo, then cut out abruptly. The booth fell silent, but this time, the silence felt different, empty, normal. I stood there, chest heaving, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. At 2:35 a.m., another car pulled up. A truck this time, with a tired-looking driver who paid his toll and drove on without incident. I didn't stop talking for the rest of the night. I narrated everything I did. Now I'm taking a sip of water. Now I'm reading this book. Now I'm watching the road. It felt ridiculous, but I didn't care. When the headless officer drove by at 4:15 a.m., I saluted him and said, "Good morning, officer. Hope you're having a quiet night." He returned the salute and continued on. At 5:30 a.m., as the sky began to lighten, I finally allowed myself to relax. The radio had switched back to classic rock at some point. I didn't remember when. When Dad picked me up at 6 a.m., I was still talking to myself. He took one look at me and nodded knowingly. "You broke rule number 4, didn't you?" he said. I nodded, embarrassed. 7 minutes, I admitted. I dropped my phone and something moved into the space you left empty, Dad finished. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You handled it right, though. You filled the silence back up, reclaimed the space." "What was it?" I asked. "What was in there with me?" Dad was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "The silence here isn't just the absence of sound, Dylan. It's a presence, a void that wants to be filled. And if you don't fill it with your own voice, with your own life, then something else will. Something that's been waiting a very long time for an invitation." We walked back toward town, the morning sun warming my face. "The rules aren't just about following orders," Dad continued. "They're about understanding how this place works. The booth sits on a threshold, between Eden and everywhere else, between our world and other places. Silence is a doorway. Sound is a lock." I thought about that for the rest of the day. That night, when I returned to the booth for my 5th shift, I brought a Bluetooth speaker with me, just in case. I wasn't taking any chances. The rules were there to protect us, and I'd learned my lesson. Never let the booth stay silent for more than 5 minutes, because silence isn't empty, it's waiting. Rule 9. If you hear your mother's voice calling from outside, it's not your mother. Rule number 9 seemed impossible to follow until I heard it myself. My mom's voice, calling me from just beyond the booth window. She sounded scared, hurt, desperate. Every instinct screamed at me to open that door, but the rule was absolute. It's not your mother. It was my 8th night at the toll booth, and I thought I'd seen everything by then. The headless officer, the thing that wore my voice, the silence that knocked from inside the walls. But I wasn't prepared for this. The night started normally enough. Cold, clear, with a half moon hanging low in the sky. I'd brought a thermos of coffee and a sandwich Dad made. Turkey and Swiss. Nothing fancy, but it tasted like home. The radio hummed softly with an old blues station. I was reading through Dad's list of rules for probably the 100th time, trying to memorize every detail. Rule number 9 caught my attention like it always did. If you hear your mother's voice calling from outside, it's not your mother. I'd asked Dad about this one the day before. His face had gone pale when I brought it up. "That's the rule I hope you never have to use," he'd said quietly. "But if you do, Dylan, promise me you'll follow it, no matter what you hear, no matter how real it sounds." I'd promised, but I didn't really understand. Not until 2:33 a.m. I was processing a payment from a nervous-looking woman in a minivan when I first heard it. Faint, distant, coming from somewhere down the dark road leading away from town. "Dylan," My hand froze on the toll arm button. That voice. The woman drove off, and I stood there, straining to hear over the radio. Nothing. Just wind and the electric hum of the booth. I shook my head. "You're tired," I muttered to myself. "Get it together." I sat back down and took a long drink of coffee. The heat helped ground me. 10 minutes passed. A truck came through. Then a sedan. Normal traffic for a Thursday night. At 2:47 a.m. I heard it again. "Dylan, honey." This time it was closer, clearer. My heart stopped. That was Mom's voice. I stood up so fast I knocked my coffee over. It spilled across the desk, but I didn't notice. I was already at the window, pressing my face against the glass, trying to see into the darkness. "Mom," I called out before I could stop myself. "Dylan, sweetheart, I need you." The voice came from the direction of the road, out past the toll arm, where the streetlight's glow faded into shadow. My hand went to the door handle. Every fiber of my being wanted to run out there, to find her, to help her. But something stopped me, a small voice in the back of my mind. Rule number 9. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not. It can't be. Dylan, please. I'm scared. I don't know where I am." Mom sounded exactly like she did 3 years ago, before the accident, before the funeral, before Dad stopped smiling. Her voice cracked with fear, and it tore something inside me. "Honey, why won't you help me? I'm right here." I could see movement in the darkness now. A figure, standing just beyond the reach of the light. The silhouette looked right. The height, the way she stood, everything. My hand tightened on the door handle. "Dylan, I'm cold. Please, just open the door." Tears blurred my vision. "Mom, you're not what, baby? I'm your mother. You know my voice. Open the door." I did know that voice. I knew it better than anything in the world. The voice that sang me to sleep when I was little. The voice that cheered at my baseball games. The voice that told me she loved me every single day until she couldn't anymore. "Please," the voice begged. "Dylan, I need you. I've been looking for you for so long." My hand started to turn the handle. Then I looked down at the rules in my other hand. Rule number 9 stared back at me. If you hear your mother's voice calling from outside, it's not your mother. But it sounded so much like her. "Dylan Michael Cross," the voice said, using my full name the way Mom always did when she was serious. "Open this door right now, young man." That almost broke me. Almost. But there was something off. Something I couldn't quite place. I closed my eyes and listened. Really listened. The voice was perfect. Too perfect. Mom used to have this little rasp when she got emotional, a catch in her throat. This voice was smooth, flawless, like a recording. "You're not my mom," I said quietly. The figure in the darkness went very still. "What did you say?" The voice was still Mom's, but there was an edge to it now, something sharp underneath. "My mom died 3 years ago," I said louder, forcing the words out. "I was there. I held her hand. You're not her." The silence that followed was crushing. Then the voice changed. It was still Mom's voice, but different, colder, harder. "You're going to leave me out here? In the dark? Alone?" "You're not alone," I said, backing away from the door. "You're not anything. You're just something," using her voice. The figure stepped forward into the edge of the light. It looked like Mom. Same brown hair, same green eyes, same slight frame. She wore the blue cardigan I'd bought her for her last birthday. But her smile was wrong, too wide. Too many teeth. Dylan, she said, and this time multiple voices spoke at once. Mom's voice layered with others, men's voices, children's voices, animal sounds. We've been so patient with you, learning your voice, your mother's voice, your father's voice, everyone you love. I grabbed the radio and cranked the volume, flooding the booth with sound. The thing that looked like Mom tilted its head at an angle that was distinctly inhuman. The radio won't help you now, Dylan. We're not like the others. We don't care about your noise. We've already found what we need. It stepped closer to the booth, still wearing my mother's face. We know what you love, what you miss, what you'd do anything to have back. Another figure emerged from the darkness behind it. This one looked like my grandfather. He'd died when I was 12. Then another. My childhood dog, Copper, who'd been hit by a car when I was 9. Then more. So many more. Friends who'd moved away. Relatives I barely remembered. All of them standing in the darkness, wearing faces I'd loved and lost. We can be anyone you want, they said in unison, their voices overlapping. Anyone you miss. Anyone you need. Just open the door, Dylan. Let us in. My back hit the far wall of the booth. There was nowhere left to go. The thing wearing Mom's face pressed its hand against the window. The glass fogged with its breath. You must be so lonely, it said softly. Your father's always angry. Your friends don't understand what you do here, but we understand. We've been watching you, learning you. We could keep you company. We could be your family again. For a moment, just a moment, I wanted to believe it. Then I remembered something Dad had said about why the rules existed. The booth sits on a threshold between our world and other places. These things, whatever they were, couldn't cross that threshold. Not without permission, not without being invited. That's what they wanted. An invitation. No, I said firmly. You need to leave. The thing's smile vanished. All of them, every figure standing in the darkness, their expressions went blank. We don't need to do anything, they said together. We can wait. We're very good at waiting. And eventually, Dylan, you'll break. Everyone does. Everyone wants their mother back. They were right about one thing. I did want my mom back, every single day. But I also knew that my real mom would never want me to open that door. She'd want me to follow the rules, to stay safe, to protect Eden. My mom loved me, I said, voice shaking but steady. And because she loved me, she'd tell me to lock this door and not open it for anything, not even her. The figures began to retreat into the darkness, but the thing with Mom's face lingered. We'll be back, Dylan, it said. We know so many voices now, so many faces. One night you'll forget to check the rules, and we'll be waiting. Then it smiled, that too wide smile with too many teeth. Sweet dreams, honey, it said in Mom's voice. And then they were gone. I stood there for a long time, shaking, tears running down my face. At 3:15 a.m., the headless officer drove past. I saluted him automatically, and he returned the gesture. Somehow, his presence made me feel better, safer. I thought about calling Dad, but my phone had no signal like always. The questions would have to wait until morning. Instead, I made myself sit back down. I turned the radio to something upbeat, classic rock, something with a lot of guitar. A car pulled up at 3:30 a.m. Just a regular guy heading home from a late shift. He paid his toll, said thanks, and drove on. Normal. Blessedly normal. But I couldn't shake the image of that thing wearing my mother's face, the way it had studied me, learning, memorizing. When Dad picked me up at 6 a.m., I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tight. "They're called the echoes," he finally said as we walked back to town. "They collect voices, memories. They feed on grief and longing. Every person who's ever passed through Eden, every person who's died here, they learn their voices." "How do they know about Mom?" I asked. "She never came to the booth." Dad's expression darkened. "They don't just learn from the booth, Dylan. They learn from us, from our thoughts, our memories. When you're in that booth, on that threshold, you're exposed, open. They can see into you. So they'll know everyone I've ever lost," I said quietly. "Yes," Dad confirmed. "That's why rule number 9 exists, and rules number 10, number 11, and number 12 too. They're all about the echoes, different voices they might use. Your mother, your best friend, me." That stopped me cold. "You. If you ever hear me calling from outside that booth at night, don't open the door," Dad said. "It won't be me. I'd never ask you to break the rules, Dylan. Never." We walked in silence for a while. "The hardest part," Dad said eventually, "is that they're so convincing. They don't just copy voices. They copy souls, or at least the memory of souls. They become what we wish we could have back." "How do you resist that?" I asked. Dad put his hand on my shoulder. "You remember that the people we loved wouldn't want us to endanger ourselves. Your mom, the real one, she'd be proud of you tonight. You followed the rules. You stayed safe. That's what she would have wanted." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, when I returned from my 9th shift, I added something to the booth. I brought a photo of Mom, a real one from before she got sick. She was laughing in it, caught mid-joke at a family barbecue. I taped it to the wall next to Dad's list of rules, a reminder of who she really was, what she really sounded like, not the too perfect voice from the darkness. When the echoes came back, and I knew they would, I'd have something to hold on to, something real. The rules were there to protect us, even from the voices of the people we loved most, especially from those. Rule 6. When you hear scratching under the booth floor, do not look down. Rule number 6 seemed easy until 2 a.m. when the scratching turned violent. It wasn't just under the floor anymore. It was everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the desk, all of it scratching, clawing, digging, trying to break through. And I realized with horror, it wasn't trying to get in. It was trying to get me to look. My 13th night at the toll booth. Lucky 13, Dad had joked that morning. But there was no humor in his eyes when he handed me the rules list. Just that same grave look he always wore. "Pay special attention to rule number 6 tonight," he'd said. I'd read it over breakfast. "When you hear scratching under the booth floor, do not look down. It's trying to make you curious." "What's under there?" I'd asked. Dad had gone very still. "Nothing you want to see, Dylan. And more importantly, nothing that should see you." Now, sitting in the booth at 10:30 p.m., I understood why he'd been so serious. Because I could already hear it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Soft at first, almost gentle, like a dog pawing at a door. It came from directly beneath my chair. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, watching the empty road. The radio played soft jazz. A car had passed through 20 minutes ago. Nothing unusual. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A little louder now, more insistent. I gripped the armrests of my chair, forcing myself not to look down. "It's nothing," I muttered. "Just settling. Old building settling." But the booth wasn't that old, and settling doesn't sound like fingernails on wood. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound moved, from directly under my chair to the left, then to the right, circling. My hands started to sweat. At 11:15 p.m., a sedan pulled up. I processed the toll on autopilot, barely registering the driver's face. They paid. I raised the arm. They drove off. The moment their taillights disappeared, the scratching got louder. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Now it sounded like something with claws, something bigger than a dog. I turned up the radio, letting Miles Davis drown out the sound, but even through the music I could feel it, the vibration through the floor, through my feet, up my legs. Whatever was down there was getting agitated. At midnight, the scratching stopped. The silence was almost worse. I sat there, barely breathing, waiting. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5, nothing. I started to relax. Maybe it was gone. Maybe crack. The sound split the air like a gunshot. I jumped, nearly falling out of my chair. Something had hit the underside of the floor. Hard. Crack, crack, crack. Like a sledgehammer pounding against wood. The whole booth shook with each impact. My coffee mug fell off the desk, shattering on the floor. I pressed myself back in the chair, eyes locked on the door, ready to run if the floor gave way. Then the impact stopped, and the scratching came back. But this time it was different. It was forming shapes, patterns. I could hear it moving in deliberate lines, left to right, down, across. It was writing something. My curiosity flared despite my fear. What was it writing? My name? A warning? I started to lean forward, to angle my head down. No. Rule number 6. Don't look down. I jerked back upright, hard hammering. That's what it wanted, for me to look, to see what it was writing. I'm not looking, I said aloud. I'm not. The scratching intensified, faster now, frantic, like it was angry I wasn't paying attention. At 12:30 a.m., a truck rumbled up to the booth. The driver was a burly man with a thick beard. He handed me his toll and froze, staring past me. You okay in there, kid? He asked. Yeah, why? He pointed behind me. Your wall's moving. I turned my head, careful not to look down, and saw what he meant. The wood paneling on the back wall was bulging, pressing outward, like something was pushing from behind. Then I heard it, scratching, coming from inside the wall now. Jesus, the driver muttered. He paid quickly and sped off. I was alone again. The scratching spread, back wall, side walls, all of them now. The wood groaned and creaked under the pressure. I could see the panels bowing, flexing. Long, thin scratches appeared in the wood grain. Deep gouges carved by something sharp, something with claws. It's not real, I whispered. It's not. Crash. A section of the back wall splintered, not breaking through completely, but cracking, creating a gap. Through the crack I saw movement, something pale, something that glistened wetly in the dim light. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't look, don't look, don't look. The scratching grew deafening. It was everywhere now, under me, around me, above me. I looked up despite myself and immediately wished I hadn't. The ceiling was covered in scratches, hundreds of them, thousands, all carved in intricate patterns, spirals and symbols and shapes that hurt to look at. And they were still being made, right before my eyes. Invisible claws carving through the wood like it was butter. Sawdust rained down on my head. I ducked under the desk, pulling my knees to my chest. The scratching followed me. It knew where I was. The underside of the desk erupted in sound. Scratch, 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 scratch. So close now, just inches from my face. I could smell something. Damp earth, rot, the metallic tang of old blood. Please stop, I begged. Please just stop. The scratching paused. In the sudden silence, I heard something else. Breathing, heavy, wet, ragged. It was right beneath me, right under the floor, and it was panting, like a dog, or something pretending to be a dog. Then it spoke, not with words, but with the scratching. It carved sounds into the wood, phonetic approximations. James, my name, scratched into the floor beneath my feet. Look. Look at me, Dylan. A-T. Look at me. M-E. My whole body trembled. Every muscle screamed at me to look, to see what was down there, what knew my name. The curiosity was overwhelming, unbearable. What did it look like? How did it know my name? What did it want? I started to lower my head. My eyes drifted down toward the floor, down toward the scratches spelling out my name. I saw the edge of something pale and glistening pressed against the underside of a crack in the floorboard. The radio blared to life, making me jump. Radio harmony. "Good evening, night wanderers," the smooth voice said. "For those of you fighting curiosity tonight, remember, some things are better left unseen, some doors are better left closed, some mysteries are better left unsolved." The voice snapped me back to reality. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my hands over them for good measure. "I'm not looking," I said firmly. "I don't care what you are. I'm not looking." The breathing beneath the floor turned into a growl. Low, primal, furious. The scratching exploded into violence. The entire booth shook. Wood splintered. The floor buckled and warped. I felt something brush against my shoe. Something cold, something wet. It had broken through. I yanked my feet up onto the chair, making myself as small as possible, eyes still clamped shut. "I'm not looking," I shouted over the noise. "You can't make me look." The growling grew louder, closer. I could feel breath on my ankle, cold and damp. Something touched my leg. Not a hand, not a paw. Something else. Something with too many joints, too many fingers. It wrapped around my calf, squeezing, testing, trying to pull me down. I kicked out blindly, connecting with something solid. It let go with a sound like tearing fabric. The booth went silent. I sat there frozen, hands still over my eyes, waiting. Seconds passed, minutes. Then I heard a car approaching. Police sirens, the headless officer. I heard his car pull up, heard the door open, heard heavy footsteps. The footsteps didn't stop at the toll booth. They went around it. Then I heard something I'll never forget. Gunshots. Not the crack of a pistol. Something bigger. Shotgun blasts. 3 of them. 4. 5. Something shrieked. Not human, not animal. Something in between. The shriek turned into a wet, gurgling sound. Then silence. The headless officer's footsteps returned to the front of the booth. He knocked twice on the door. I still didn't open my eyes. I wasn't sure what I was more afraid of. What was under the booth, or what the officer had just shot. He knocked again, harder. I carefully removed my hands from my eyes, but kept them focused straight ahead. Not down, never down. I stood on shaky legs and moved to the door. I opened it, eyes locked on where the officer's face should have been. The bloody stump of his neck somehow seemed comforting. He gestured to his patrol car. The back seat was empty this time. Whatever he'd shot, he hadn't arrested it. I saluted him. My hand was shaking. He returned the gesture, then walked around the booth. I heard him doing something, moving things, dragging something heavy. When he came back, he was carrying a toolbox. For the next hour, while I stayed in the booth, the headless officer repaired the floor. I heard hammering, sawing. The smell of fresh wood filled the air. I processed 3 more cars during that time. Each driver looked at the officer working beneath the booth and quickly paid their toll without questions. At 4 a.m., the officer finished. He knocked on the door again. I opened it. He handed me a piece of paper. On it, written in surprisingly neat handwriting, "Replaced the boards, reinforced the foundation. It won't get through again tonight, but don't ever look down. They wait decades for someone to look. Don't give it the satisfaction." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He tipped an invisible hat and drove off. I went back inside the booth. The floor looked new, solid, safe, but I could still hear it. Faint now, distant, but there. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was still down there, still waiting, still hoping I'd look. When dawn finally broke at 6 a.m., the scratching stopped completely, like it had never been there at all. Dad was waiting for me as usual. He took one look at my face and knew. "Rule number 6, he said. It wasn't a question. "Rule number 6, I confirmed. We walked back to town in silence. I didn't tell him about almost looking, about how close I'd come. Some things were better kept to myself. That night before my shift, Dad handed me something, a pair of headphones, noise canceling. "For when it gets bad," he said. "The scratching is designed to break you down, to make you curious. Music helps." "What is it?" I asked. "What's down there?" Dad's expression darkened. "Something that's been under this town since before Eden existed. Something that was here first. The booth was built over it, to keep it contained, to keep it from spreading. And it wants out," I said. "No," Dad corrected. "It wants to be seen, to be acknowledged. The moment you look at it, you give it power, you give it form, you make it real in a way it isn't now." He put his hand on my shoulder. "The scratching will never stop, Dylan. Every night it'll try. Different strategies, different sounds. But the rule stays the same. Don't look down, no matter what you hear, no matter what you feel." That night, when I returned to the booth, I brought the headphones. But I also brought something else. A blindfold, just in case. Because I knew my own weaknesses. And curiosity was the biggest one. The scratching started at 11:30 p.m. I put on the headphones and turned up the music. I didn't look down. I never looked down. And I never will. Rule 1. If a driver has no reflection in your window, take their money but don't touch their hand. Rule number 1 never made sense until I saw her. Beautiful, elegant, smiling warmly as she held out a crisp dollar bill. But the glass reflected only darkness where she should have been. My fingers were an inch from hers when I remembered. Don't touch their hand. Some people aren't people anymore. It was my 16th night at the toll booth, and I was starting to feel like a veteran. I knew the rhythms of the night now, the regular drivers, the strange ones, the ones who paid without speaking, the ones who spoke too much. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. It was 1:47 a.m., and I hadn't seen a car in nearly 40 minutes. The radio played softly, some old country song about lost love and empty highways. Then I saw headlights in the distance. A car approached slowly, too slowly, like the driver was in no hurry, or like they were savoring something. As it got closer, I could make out the shape. A vintage Cadillac, pristine, cherry red with chrome that gleamed even in the dim light. The kind of car you'd see in a museum, not on a back road at 2 a.m. It pulled up to the booth, and my breath caught. The driver was stunning, a woman, maybe in her 30s, with dark hair that fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. She wore a black dress that looked like it cost more than my car. Her makeup was flawless. Red lips curved into a warm, inviting smile. She rolled down her window, and I caught a whiff of her perfume. Roses and something else. Something sweet and cloying that made my head feel light. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was silk. "Honey, everything beautiful." "Evening, ma'am," I managed, trying not to stare. "That'll be 1 penny. She laughed. It sounded like wind chimes. "Of course. I have exact change." She reached into her purse, a small black clutch, and pulled out a crisp dollar bill. Not a penny, a whole dollar. "Oh, that's too much," I said. "I can't make change for—" "Keep it," she interrupted, her smile widening. "Consider it a tip. You look like you've had a long night." She extended her hand through the window, holding the bill between perfectly manicured fingers. Red nails, the same shade as her lipstick. I reached out automatically, my fingers stretching toward hers. That's when I saw it, the reflection in the booth window. I could see her car clearly, the red paint, the chrome, the leather interior. But the driver's seat was empty. No woman, no black dress, no red lips, just empty space. My hand froze, hovering inches from hers. Rule number 1 flashed through my mind like a lightning bolt. If a driver has no reflection in your window, take their money but don't touch their hand. The woman's smile didn't falter, but something changed in her eyes. A flicker, a darkness. Is something wrong? She asked sweetly. No, ma'am, I said, carefully keeping my voice steady. Just let me get something to take that with. I turned away, breaking eye contact, and grabbed a small plastic basket I kept for situations like this. My hands were shaking as I held it out. If you could just drop it in here, I said. Her smile tightened. Just a fraction, but I saw it. Why? She asked. It's easier if you just take it from me. Booth policy, I lied. We're not supposed to handle cash directly. Sanitation rules. Her eyes narrowed. The warmth drained from her face like water from a tub. Take it from my hand, she said. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a command. I can't, ma'am. Please just drop it in the basket. She stared at me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then slowly, deliberately, she placed the dollar bill in the basket. The moment the money left her fingers, I felt the temperature drop. My breath came out in a visible cloud. Thank you, I said quickly, hitting the button to raise the toll arm. She didn't drive forward. You know, she said, her voice colder now, it's rude to refuse a lady's generosity. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's just the rules. Rules, she repeated, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile anymore. Yes, rules. You people and your rules. I didn't respond. I kept my hand on the toll arm button, ready to lower it if she tried to reverse. She tilted her head, studying me. In the reflection, the empty driver's seat tilted too. Like an invisible puppet master was controlling the car. How many nights have you been here? She asked. I don't think that's answer me. The command hit me like a physical force. I felt compelled to speak. 16, I said before I could stop myself. She smiled again. This time, I noticed her teeth. They were too white, too perfect, and there were too many of them. 16 nights, still so new, still so fresh. She inhaled deeply, like she was breathing me in. I can smell it on you. The fear, the uncertainty. You're still learning what you are, what this place is. The toll arm is up, I said, trying to keep my voice firm. You're free to go. Free, she laughed. Oh, child, none of us are free. Not you, not me, not anyone who comes through this place. She leaned closer to the window. In the reflection, the movement looked wrong, disjointed, like her image and her body weren't quite synchronized. Do you want to know what happens when you touch us? She whispered. When your skin meets ours? No, ma'am. We don't take your life, not immediately. That would be too simple, too quick. Her smile widened impossibly. We take your warmth first, just a little. You wouldn't even notice. Then we come back the next night, and the next, each time taking a little more. Your warmth, your breath, your heartbeat, until one night. She paused, letting the silence hang. Until one night, you're the one driving up to this booth, and you're the one with no reflection, and some other poor soul is sitting where you are now, wondering why they can't see you in the glass. My blood ran cold. That's not going to happen, I said. No? She tilted her head again. You seem so certain. But tell me, Dylan, how many times did you almost touch me? How close did your fingers get? She knew my name. I never told her my name. How do you... I know everything about you, she interrupted. I've been watching you. Every night you've been here, waiting for you to make a mistake, waiting for you to slip. She held up her hand again, palm facing me. One touch. That's all it takes. Skin to skin, and you'll be like us, driving these roads forever. Neither alive nor dead, just hollow. I backed away from the window, pressing myself against the far wall of the booth. She laughed. Don't worry, not tonight. You were careful tonight. But there will be other nights, other opportunities. And eventually, Dylan, you'll forget. You'll get comfortable, complacent. She put her hand on the steering wheel. In the reflection, the wheel turned by itself. I'll see you again, she said. Soon. The Cadillac pulled forward, passing through the toll booth. I watched in the reflection as the driverless car moved down the road, but through the windshield, I could still see her, sitting in the driver's seat, smiling, waving. The moment her car disappeared around the bend, I collapsed into my chair. My whole body was shaking. Cold sweat dripped down my back. I looked at the dollar bill in the basket. For a moment, I considered throwing it away, burning it, anything to get rid of it. But then I noticed something. The dollar bill was old, very old. The date on it read 1952, 70 years old. I put the bill in a separate envelope and sealed it. I wasn't going to spend it. I wasn't even going to touch it directly. For the next hour, I watched every car that came through with paranoid intensity. I checked every reflection, every shadow, every detail. 3 more cars passed through. All of them had reflections. All of them were normal. At 3 a.m., I decided to call Dad. I knew he wouldn't answer. My phone never had signal at the booth, but I needed to try. No signal, as always. I pulled out the rules list and read rule number 1 again. If a driver has no reflection in your window, take their money but don't touch their hand. There was a small note at the bottom in Dad's handwriting. I'd never noticed it before. The touch is a transfer. They take from you. You become like them. No cure, no reversal. Prevention is the only protection. My stomach turned. I'd been so close. An inch, maybe less. What would have happened if I'd touched her? At 4:30 a.m., I heard a car approaching. My heart jumped into my throat, but it was just the headless officer making his rounds. I practically ran to the door to salute him. He returned the gesture, then paused. He walked to his trunk and pulled out a pair of leather gloves. He handed them to me through the window. They were thick, heavy-duty, the kind that mechanics wear. He pointed to them, then to me, then made a gesture like taking money. For protection? I asked. He nodded. In case I accidentally touch one of them. He nodded again. Will these stop the transfer? He made a so-so gesture with his hand. Better than nothing, but not perfect. I put the gloves on immediately. They were too big, but I didn't care. The headless officer patted the top of the booth twice, almost reassuringly, and drove off. I sat back down, wearing the gloves, and stared at the envelope with the $1952 bill. How long had she been driving these roads? How many people had she touched? How many others were out there like her? At 5:15 a.m., another car pulled up. An old man, friendly smile. He paid with a penny, dropped it in the basket without me asking, and drove off. His reflection was clear in the glass. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. When Dad picked me up at 6 a.m., I handed him the envelope with the old dollar bill. He opened it, looked at the date, and his face went pale. "The woman in red," he said quietly. "You know her? Everyone who's worked this booth knows her. She's been coming through since before I was born, since before your grandfather was born." "How long?" I asked. Dad looked at the bill again. "This date? 1952. That's probably when she changed, when she became what she is now." "Someone touched her hand." "Yes, someone broke the rule, and she's been trying to pass it on ever since." We walked in silence for a moment. "Dad," I said carefully, "how many of them are there? People with no reflections?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. "More than you'd think, less than you'd fear. They can only come through at night, only through the booth, and only if you let them." "Let them?" "Touch is consent, Dylan. In this place, on this threshold, touch means acceptance. You accept their nature. You accept their curse. You become a willing vessel." He put his hand on my shoulder. "That's why the rule is so absolute. No touching, ever, not even accidentally." That night I came back to the booth wearing the leather gloves, and I've worn them every night since. The woman in red came back 3 more times over the next month. Each time she smiled. Each time she offered money directly to me. Each time I refused. On her last visit, she stopped trying. "You're learning," she said, almost sadly. "That's unfortunate. For me." "I'm sorry," I said. And strangely, I meant it. She nodded. "So am I. It's lonely, you know, being like this, neither here nor there. I just wanted company." She drove off, and I haven't seen her since. But I know she's still out there, still driving, still hoping, still waiting for someone to break rule number 1. I won't be that person. I wear the gloves. I check the reflections. And I never, ever touch their hands. Because some prices are too high to pay, and some curses are forever. Rule 10. When someone whispers instead of speaking, read their lips. Never ask them to repeat. Rule number 10 seemed overly specific until the night a driver whispered his toll payment. I couldn't hear him, so naturally I said, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" His smile grew wider. "Of course," he said. But this time his voice was so loud it shattered the booth mirror. And he kept talking. He wouldn't stop talking. My 21st night at the toll booth, 3 weeks in, and I was finally starting to feel confident. I knew the rules. I knew what to watch for. I knew how to handle the strange ones. Pride comes before the fall, they say. They're right. The night was unusually busy. Cars had been coming through steadily since 10 p.m. Normal people, normal cars, normal transactions. It lulled me into a false sense of security. At 2:34 a.m., a gray sedan pulled up to the booth. The driver was a man in his 40s, maybe 50s. Hard to tell. He had one of those faces that could be any age. Nondescript features, brown hair, average build, the kind of person you'd forget the moment they walked away. He rolled down his window and smiled at me, a pleasant, unremarkable smile. Then his lips started moving. I couldn't hear anything. I leaned forward slightly, trying to catch what he was saying. His mouth was definitely forming words, but no sound was coming out. Or rather, no sound was reaching me. "I'm sorry, sir," I said, raising my voice slightly. "I can't hear you. Could you speak up?" His smile didn't change, but his lips kept moving. Still no sound. I tapped my ear, signaling that I couldn't hear him. He nodded, understanding. His mouth moved again, more deliberately this time. I could see the words forming. 1 penny, please. Okay, normal enough. He was just speaking quietly. Maybe he had a sore throat or something. I held out the toll basket, and he dropped in a penny. Standard transaction. But then he started speaking again, his lips moving rapidly now, forming words I couldn't quite make out. Sir, I said. Did you need something else? He kept whispering. His eyes locked on mine, intense, focused. I felt a prickle of unease. I'm sorry, I said again, but I really can't hear you. Could you repeat that? The moment the words left my mouth, I remembered. Rule number 10. When someone whispers instead of speaking, read their lips. Never ask them to repeat. Oh no. The man's smile stretched wider, much wider, from ear to ear, literally. Of course, he said. This time I heard him. But it wasn't a normal voice. It was loud, deafeningly loud, like someone had cranked a megaphone up to maximum volume and pressed it directly against my eardrums. The booth windows rattled. The mirror on the wall cracked down the middle with a sharp snap. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from everywhere. From the walls, from the floor, from inside my own skull. I said, the voice boomed, thank you for your service. Each word hit like a physical blow. I felt them in my chest, in my bones. The light bulb overhead exploded, raining glass down on me. I said, I've been driving for a very long time. My coffee mug vibrated off the desk and shattered on the floor. I said, this road goes on forever. The desk itself started shaking. Books fell from the shelf. The radio sparked and died. I said, stop! I screamed, though I could barely hear my own voice over his. But he didn't stop. I said, I'm tired of whispering. The toll arm began to shake, metal groaning. I said, I want to be heard. Cracks spiderwebbed across the remaining windows. I said, I need to be heard. Blood started dripping from my ears. I could feel it, warm and wet, trickling down my neck. The man's mouth kept moving, words pouring out in an endless torrent, each one louder than the last. I said, I've been silent for so long. I said, no one listens. I said, no one ever listens. I tried to crawl toward the door, but the sound pinned me down. It was like being underwater, like drowning in noise. My vision blurred. The booth spun around me. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard something else. Something beneath the man's booming voice. Other voices, dozens of them, hundreds, all speaking at once, all saying different things. Help me. I'm lost. Where am I? It's so dark. Please, please, please. They weren't just words. They were screams, sobs, desperate pleas layered on top of each other, building into a cacophony of anguish. I realized with horror, these were all the people who'd made the same mistake I did. All the people who'd asked him to repeat himself. And now their voices were trapped in his, forced to speak forever, never stopping, never resting. I said I collect voices. Oh God. I said yours will be a fine addition. No, 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 no. I fumbled for the rules list with shaking hands. My vision was going dark around the edges. My ears felt like they were going to burst. Rule number 10. There had to be more. There had to be instructions on what to do if you broke it. But there was nothing. Just the rule. No contingency plan. Think, Dylan. Think. The radio. Rule number 5. Never turn off the old radio. But it was already off. Destroyed by the sound. The headless officer. He always showed up when things went wrong, but he wasn't here. I was alone. The voices grew louder, more frantic. The booth felt like it was going to tear itself apart. Then I remembered something Dad had said. Sound is a weapon. Your voice is a weapon. My voice. If this thing collected voices, if it fed on sound. I took a deep breath, tasting blood, and screamed. Not words, just sound. Raw, primal. Every ounce of fear and anger and desperation I had. I screamed until my throat was raw, until I tasted copper, until I had nothing left. And then I screamed more. The man's voice faltered, just for a second. The other voices, the trapped ones, they faltered too. I kept screaming. I wasn't giving him words. I wasn't giving him language. Just noise. Pure, meaningless noise. He couldn't collect that. He couldn't trap that. The man's smile started to slip. His eyes widened. "Wait!" he boomed. I screamed louder. "Stop!" Louder. "You can't!" I grabbed the metal toll basket and banged it against the desk, adding to the noise. Crash, bang, clang. No rhythm, no pattern, just chaos. The man's voice began to distort. The layered voices behind it started to separate, becoming discordant. He pressed his hands over his ears, mouth still moving, but the sound starting to fade. I didn't stop. I banged the basket, stomped my feet, screamed until my vision went white. Finally, his voice cut out. Silence. Blessed, painful silence. The man sat in his car, hands still over his ears, mouth frozen open in a silent scream. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then slowly, his mouth closed, his hands lowered. His expression was confused, lost, like he didn't know where he was or how he got there. The toll, he said quietly, actually quietly this time. 1 penny? His voice was normal, human, tired. You already paid. I managed to croak. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. He looked down at the toll basket, saw his penny, and nodded. Right, thank you. He rolled up his window and drove through, just like that, like nothing had happened. I collapsed against the wall, ears still ringing, blood drying on my neck. The booth was destroyed, the mirror shattered, windows cracked, equipment broken, papers and glass everywhere. I sat there for I don't know how long. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. Eventually, I heard a car approaching, police lights, the headless officer. He stepped into the booth and surveyed the damage. Then he looked at me, or would have if he had eyes. I tried to salute, but my arm wouldn't cooperate. He held up a hand. It's okay, the gesture seemed to say. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a first aid kit. He set it down next to me, then pulled out a notepad. He wrote, "You broke rule number 10. I nodded, ashamed. He wrote, "But you survived. That's rare." He wrote, "The whisperer collects voices, traps them, forces them to speak forever. You gave him nothing to collect. Smart." He wrote, "Your voice will hurt for a while. Don't try to talk too much. Let it heal." I nodded again. He wrote one more thing. "He'll be back. They always come back. But he won't remember. He never does. Just don't make the same mistake twice." The headless officer cleaned up the booth while I sat there. He replaced the broken light bulb, swept up the glass, covered the cracked mirror with a tarp. When he was done, he gave me a crisp salute and left. I spent the rest of the night processing tolls in near silence. My throat was too damaged to speak much anyway. Every time I had to communicate with a driver, I pointed to a sign I'd made. Laryngitis, sorry for any inconvenience. Most people just nodded and went on their way. At 6 a.m. when Dad picked me up, he took one look at me and knew. "Rule number 10, he said. not a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Can you talk? I tried. Yeah, I whispered. Hurts. He handed me a water bottle. Drink slow. Small sips. We walked in silence. After a while, he spoke. The whisper is one of the oldest things that comes through. Been around since before the booth was built. Before Eden existed. He paused. It collects voices because it doesn't have one of its own. Never did. It's a hollow thing. An echo of something that was never really there. The voices I heard, I rasped. Inside his voice were those, yes, every person who made your mistake, every person who asked him to repeat himself, their voices get trapped inside him, forced to speak his words forever. My stomach turned. How many? Dad's expression darkened. Hundreds, maybe thousands. The whisperer has been collecting for a very, very long time. Why doesn't it remember? The officer said it never remembers. Because it's not really alive, not in any way that matters. It's more like a recording, a loop. It drives through, whispers, collects, drives on. Then it resets and does it again. It doesn't know what it is or what it's doing. It just does it. That's horrible, I whispered. Yes, Dad agreed. It is. We reached the house. Dad made me tea with honey. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping slowly, throat still burning. You did good, Dad said finally. Most people who break rule number 10 don't make it out. Their voices get added to the collection, and that's that. But you fought back. You used your voice as a weapon instead of letting it be a tool. I just screamed, I said. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's all you need. That night, when I returned to the booth, I brought cough drops, throat spray, a thermos of warm tea, and a new sign I'd made. Please speak clearly, hearing difficulties. If someone whispered, I'd point to the sign and read their lips. I wouldn't ask them to repeat. Never again. The whisperer came back exactly 1 week later. Same gray sedan, same unremarkable face, same pleasant smile. His lips started moving in that same silent way. This time, I was ready. I watched his mouth carefully. 1 penny, please. I held out the basket. He dropped in the penny. Then his lips kept moving, forming more words. I didn't ask him to repeat. I just watched. Thank you for your service. I nodded. I've been driving for a very long time. I nodded again. This road goes on forever. Another nod. His smile widened slightly, but not too wide this time. He seemed satisfied. Then he drove off. Normal, quiet, harmless. As long as you didn't ask him to repeat himself. I updated the rules list that night, added a personal note at the bottom of rule number 10. The whisperer doesn't want to hurt you. He just wants to be heard. But he doesn't understand the difference between listening and being consumed. Read his lips, acknowledge his words with a nod, but never, ever ask him to speak again. His second voice isn't meant for human ears. It's meant for collecting, and you don't want to be part of his collection. 21 nights in, and I'd learned the most important lesson of all. The rules weren't arbitrary. They weren't superstition. They were survival, and I was finally starting to understand why.